This is a message from your guides reading for Human Angel. So I have two crystals here. I have my Fuchsite, which has to do with getting various information. It can be from past lives, psychic information, and it generally has to do with healing yourself. And it can really be about healing anything. It doesn't have to be like the physical body. It can be the physical body. It can be not only healing anything, but also sort of finding solutions to things. Also realizing what the root of a problem is. And obviously, there's a lot of heart chakra energies with this stone as well, all the green there. And then the other that I have here is my peacock ore. So this focuses on all of the various chakras, maintaining them, cleansing them. Okay, so this is the crystal that I'm going to use to start by surrounding us in some protective space. Okay, so the first thing coming up is more your crown chakra area, and it just feels like a lot of questions, and also just a lot of energies, a lot of things going on, a lot of questions, and then it also feels like sometimes there's this bit of almost frustration that you can't access the answers yourself. But there's this feeling from your guides like some questions, it's almost like some questions reveal themselves. And so some answers we're almost not supposed to have access to right away. And we sort of find the answers through life. Just as we sort of continue living it. So some things just answer themselves, some things reveal themselves. Some of this I feel like really has to do with the living situation. So it feels like you have this opportunity. So you have this opportunity where you can go live somewhere else. You're saying that you feel like there might be some trouble for you if you go and do this, but then at the same time where you are living, it seems like there's trouble brewing over there as well. But there's just this general feeling almost of staying put for now, which is pretty much what you're doing anyway. Because again, it just sort of feels like the answer kind of hasn't revealed itself. I feel like it has to do with what the answer will come through whatever happens with your current living situation. If it escalates, you know, I have to leave here. And if it doesn't, then it feels like the question sort of answers itself. So it almost feels like this other place is sort of um, almost presenting you with an option, almost like a fail-safe in a way, if something does happen with your current living situation. So it feels like you're provided for and you're safe. And this, it doesn't feel like that has to be a long-term solution. It could be. And again, that just feels like, however, the sort of, again, however it would sort of reveal itself to be. But they are saying that at the same time, you can't run from things. Because it does feel like you know that you haven't done anything wrong in the situation. So you know that this isn't really on you. This is on the other person. This definitely feels like the landlord. This doesn't feel like yourself. And they're even reminding me of like a long time ago, which I had completely forgotten about, how um, you were already having some other issues with the landlord. So there were already things that he wasn't doing or that he wasn't fulfilling. And you are just living there. So it more feels like you're sort of just being a victim to kind of a lack of responsibility on the other person's part. And it feels like this could just completely die down and he doesn't even care anymore. Or he holds some grudge against you and it escalates somehow. But either way, again, it feels like you're protected and you're safe. And even if you did go into this other thing and something did happen with this other person, it feels like the friend that you have who is there and who would also be living with you, it feels like they trust you. It feels like they're a good friend, like they're a decent person. So even that, it feels like there's some protection offered there. There's kind of a little bit of a physical kind of safety net. But it feels like sometimes fears manifest into forms, especially um, with you. Um, it feels like they especially tend to manifest into forms of actual people and people saying things or trying to do things. And again, this is going back to some past life stuff where you did have people attacking you and coming at you, and in that lifetime, they could do substantial things. Whereas in this lifetime, you are very safe, you're protected. Even if something were to happen, where it seemed like it could escalate into something big, it just feels like it would end up being a more minor occurrence. And it feels that way almost for everybody involved. So it feels like um your guides and this like protective kind of energy that you have around you, it feels like it's constant, not constantly, but like as they come up, it's always and sometimes constantly though, um sort of like kind of depending on what's coming up for you with your subconscious. So I think they've talked about this before. It's like sometimes your subconscious will lay low for a little while and things will seem like they're going a bit better, and then it'll kind of show up again really intensely for a bit. But it feels like you're when that happens, your guides are constantly like putting out any fires because they're showing me water. It's like they're putting out any fires that your subconscious manifests or even tries to manifest as well, it feels like. And again, it's just going back to an underlying fear. Okay, so then that's bringing them to this other question. So now they're talking about the psychic stuff where you're asking about your abilities and should you be developing them. And they're saying that that's why it is important for you to be developing those. For the reason of facing this fear ultimately and transforming it. And they do mean transforming it because they're kind of talking about coating it in something else. And it feels almost like seeing it as something else, but then they're also talking about sort of alchemy. And when you kind of coat something in something else, let's say you coat it in like a layer of positivity, it changes, it transforms um, into like an actual occurrence out of that new energy, out of something else. So it becomes something different. And you take this tragic thing and you turn it around. But they're also saying that different abilities manifest in different ways for different people. And so one thing might trigger psychic abilities or mediumship abilities or whatever it is, healing abilities for one person that doesn't trigger it for another person, and maybe that person is equally psychic, maybe they're more psychic, and they're just hiding it in some way for some reason. Maybe it's not the right time for them. Maybe they're not ready to accomplish that yet or look at that yet. Maybe there's something else blocking that, whereas the other person was more open, or maybe it was just the right moment for them. Or it could just have to do with the thing, whatever it is that they're using, whatever technique or practices or that class or experience. It could be hypnosis. It could be a near-death experience that triggers something for someone. It can be a class. It can be a motorcycle accident. It can really be, you know, unlimited number of ways that a person can come into their abilities, including it can just be developing them over time. That's also another standard way that they can come up. So they're saying that it depends on the person. It really does go person by person, and no one thing is going to work for everyone. And just because you're not seeing them um, in a certain way, because they're saying that you are, just sort of not in this standard way that people sort of classify as psychic or medium. So they're saying that that doesn't really mean anything. That doesn't matter. What matters is that they are there, they are intact, and you have to find what works for you. Some people can just, answer questions immediately and it's accurate and they don't even know what they're doing. That doesn't normally happen. Most people do have to develop them in some way. But even then, that goes back to some past life and probably a fairly recent one where this person had already developed those abilities and was using them. So it's not just like luck or something where they're born into it. It's that they already worked to develop that muscle. And so they're just automatically granted that. And in your case, you would have that naturally as well. And you do. So the only reason that in some cases, in certain ways, it seems like it doesn't appear or it's not there for you is just, again, because of these blocks. So one thing is that you have to be comfortable. You have to feel safe. So in some ways, with a group of people that's very open to this stuff and learning it with themselves. So that does feel almost like some kind of class or something. But they're saying that you might have to take several. Maybe you take one, but also you might have to take various types. You don't know. And that, again, just has to do with what's going to work for you and what's going to help trigger something with you. And also the fact that you are still working through these blocks. So it's like you're going to be working through blocks to kind of slowly transform this as you're kind of moving through it. And they're also saying that slowly doesn't have to mean 5 years, even a month. It can seem slow, um, depending on the nature of it, depending on the nature of that month, the feeling of that month. They're also not saying a month. Um, they're not they're not giving any kind of time period, but they're just saying sort of not to think of like linear time in general when they're saying slow or fast or any of these things. It just has to do with a kind of breaking point, a sort of triggering point. And then it manifests and things become clear. And they're also saying that you don't have to clear like the whole thing, this whole big past life all these issues from these various past lives. It really has to do with breaking it enough. And then just continuing, and you break more and more as you go along. But it doesn't have to all be shattered before you can give a reading or before you can accurately tell someone something or accurately see something or hear something or however it works for you. Feel something. Okay. So I'm going to move on to this last question. So this is question 3, the yes or no question. I'm just going to go over this really quick, just reading it. Okay, again, this goes back to what they were basically just saying, which is that no one thing works for everyone. They're also saying that things like statements, if they're going to work, they really have to, it really has to do with the person's, not only their intent, but their belief in it, especially with something as vague as just a statement. So people have all kinds of prayers and things that they say, but they're saying, but keep in mind that it is your mind creating this. Sometimes you can call on something, like a guide, for instance, who can help you, or some other being type that can help you and is positive, and maybe there's a prayer calling on that. But even your ability to connect with that energy through the prayer is still something that your mind is creating and manifesting along with this other being. So you might feel a connection to something through a certain prayer, and somebody else, they're calling on the same being, and maybe that connection, maybe that being would connect with them really well through some other statement or some other prayer or whatever it is, and it really just has to do with the person's resonation. So they're saying that if you don't feel anything about it, or that it seems to do nothing for you when you're using it, then they're saying not to use it because it's useless and to try something else. But they're saying useless for you if it's not doing anything for you. If somebody else feels something, again, this is what their mind is creating. This is how they're interpreting the words that they are reading. And that's how they are interpreting what that should do for them. Clearly, this person that you were referring to believes in this statement. And this just has to do If she feels like it works for her, it just has to do with her own beliefs. And even part of it might even be the group that it's associated with. If you feel nothing about it, whereas she does, then a statement coming from that group is going to do more for her than for you. They're also saying that anything can be used for a good or a bad purpose. So something can be on somebody's path, even Christianity, for instance, they're saying. It can be on somebody's path for a time so that they can learn and glean certain things, certain information, or maybe there's certain information, um, sorry, or maybe there's certain lessons that they need to learn. And that's what's going to help them do that. Maybe there's karma that they need to clear. Maybe it even has to do with a being. Maybe for some reason they need a stronger connection with Jesus or a certain angel for their life path for some reason. But they're saying that the problem is when people become stuck and they see it as the only way. And they're saying that there can be a lot of various problems. I don't need to go into them all or even into any of them really. They're saying you can think of some off of the top of your head that a person could have from sort of binding themselves to any kind of belief or practice, and that it can be dangerous or it can also be enlightening. It really depends on the way that you use it. And you get stuck in it, or does it actually help to free you? And it depends on how you use it, and also how you feel while you're using it. What your feeling is, what your intent is, and that's going to kind of direct how it's used by you, and so therefore whether or not it's useful or it's useless. But they're also saying that sometimes people don't realize when something is useless. If they get so stuck in it, it's actually damaging them. It's actually doing the polar opposite of what their intent would be. And that's just because they get so stuck into thinking that that's the only way. But again, they're saying that nothing works for everyone. So there's no right way for every single person. And they're saying that that is part of the key to understanding, to beginning to understand what is going to help you to transform these blocks that you have and trigger your own psychic abilities to come up, again, in a certain way, because they're definitely showing up. Just not in this sort of focused, detailed kind of way, where you can filter through things and learn to access specific pieces of information. But even I had to learn how to do that. So that doesn't mean that a person doesn't have ability. That's just exactly what they're saying. They don't know how to filter through various things. They're not really aware yet of how their abilities work or even what they are sometimes. And so things get a little bit confusing. Sometimes people don't know how to properly set up a sacred space even. And so a lot of different things can try to get in, and that can make it really muddled. sometimes people are trying to use a specific ability that they don't really have. They know they're psychic in some way, but they don't really know what their abilities are yet. And so they're sort of chasing the wrong one. And their abilities don't end up opening up that way. They come from some other way, some other angle, um, where they're kind of forced to use a different ability. And then they realize that they have that one and it works for them in that way. But again, they're also saying the timing of it as well. But the timing of it with them more has to do with when you're ready to release these blocks. And so a lot of that has to do with going back to something that they were saying before. How do you feel? So it has to be a comfortable setting. You feel safe, you feel good doing what you're doing, at least to the best of your ability, since you do have these blocks. And you don't feel like ashamed or I mean, you might have some things come up. You might feel a little threatened or something just based off what you're doing. But the majority of you needs to feel, stable, peaceful, calm, and feel like whatever you're doing, who you're doing it with mostly is um, supporting that and bringing that out. And that's more what they mean by timing, because timing to them, again, has to do with when you're ready to remove the block. So sometimes it actually has to do with the ideal setting. And when you find that, then it's the right timing. Then you allow yourself to transform this certain area of your life. Okay, so that is all that your guides have to say for this reading. So thank you very much for allowing me to do it for you. I truly hope, as always, that it benefits you. Namaste.